So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our two speakers. We have Larinda Smith from Unbound. She's going to talk with us first. And then after that, we have Tommy Grover, who's going to talk with us. Larinda is the Director of Community Outreach for Unbound Fort Worth. In her role with Unbound, she coordinates human trafficking presentations in the community and trainings for professionals who work with vulnerable populations. These presentations and trainings bring awareness of human trafficking, its prevalence in our community, red flags to identify potential victims, and how to respond when a victim has been identified. Larinda has personally witnessed the impact training has provided in identifying victims, because as more individuals are empowered with knowledge, more victims are being identified. So hopefully, as we're talking today, you're able to kind of gain some of those skills and some of that knowledge so that when you're out and about or in your work, you're able to kind of understand what to look for and what to do. After Larinda talks, we have Tommy Grover. She has been with the North Texas Regional Administrator of the Child Sex Trafficking Team since August 2018. She holds a PhD in social work. She was certified as a law enforcement officer early in her educational career, and she is also a TCOLE instructor for advanced human trafficking and missing and exploited children courses. Tommy has spent the last 12 years helping to educate professionals and advocate for trafficking victims. So we have some pretty amazing ladies today that are going to talk about their experience and talk about their knowledge when it comes to human trafficking. So without further ado, here is Larinda.
All right, great. All right, we're going to transition over so you can see my screen. All right. And are you guys able to see it already? Oh, there we go. You'll have to forgive my technology understanding. Sometimes I can kind of mess it up just a little bit, but like Jenny said, there are a couple of videos in this presentation. I just want to say up front that if you're not able to watch them, that there will be links provided for you to go back and watch them at a later time. But I want to let you know how important it is that you all are seeing this presentation today, because it really is it's life-changing, because human trafficking is such a part of our lives now. Especially you throw in the internet in here, human trafficking has been happening for a very long time. It didn't have a name put to it until in more recent years. And so and of course, like I said, throw the internet in there, and now it's even more prevalent, and globally as well as locally. And so first off, I just want you to know that, oh, sorry, it's not, let me get the right button here. I want you to know that it is here. There is hope, and you are a part of the solution, okay? There's lots of information out there about what human trafficking looks like. I know even personally for me, just being on social media, like I see things come through and I'm like, it just, there's good information out there and there's bad information out there. And I hope that in seeing the training today that you can be empowered with the knowledge of what it really does look like for us, and then, be able to take that information and share that with others so that they have the correct information going forward. Let's see here. Let me move. I've got something on my screen here. I'm just going to move it out of the way just a little bit here. Okay. So one of the important things is, like I said, when you're empowered with knowledge, you have the ability to change someone's life. That life may be someone in your family, it could be someone in the community, it could be someone you work with, but you have that ability now to help someone. And this is a quote from a survivor that was identified by someone in a social service organization that just happened to be hearing the story and thought, that sounds like human trafficking. That individual had never heard of human trafficking. And so and the great thing is that that person did get out of the situation, is now safe, and provided this quote. It says, "You have no idea how much you have changed my life. You have inadvertently touched more lives than just mine because you took part in helping me build a testimony that will help a lot of people one day. Thank you for all you do." And like I said, this was someone just doing their day-to-day job, helping individuals, and this person happened to share their story, and thankfully that individual was able to get out of that situation and is now doing so great. And so we're very, very thankful. Sorry guys, I keep advancing the slide incorrectly. All right, so what is human trafficking? Well, it's a crime that involves exploitation of a person for labor or commercial sex. You will probably hear us talk more about sex trafficking than labor trafficking in some aspects of this, specifically when we're talking about minors. I can say specifically for Unbound that we see more sex trafficking than labor trafficking of individuals. Sometimes there is a gray line there where it is sex and labor trafficking together for an individual, but commercial sex is defined as something that's being done in exchange for something of value. Now that value could be it could be money, it could be drugs, it could be a place to stay, anything that is something of value. It could be food. We even see that, a lot of times an individual who may be living on the street, just wants a meal, and they can be exploited in an attempt to get some food. Now, if someone is under the age of 18, then it is considered automatic human trafficking because a child under the age of 18 cannot give consent. And so anytime that is involved, if they are receiving anything in exchange for commercial sex or whatnot, then that is automatic human trafficking. Now, all of this came to be an official law through the TVPA, or also known as the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. That is what broke down what human trafficking legally is and who can be charged with human trafficking. Now, this is a long list here of a lot of language, so I'm going to break it down a little bit further. So, what it is there's an action and a means and a purpose to this law. So if you are doing any of the actions, which is the recruiting, harboring, transporting, patronizing, buying, any of those items, you can be charged with human trafficking if it was done under the means of force, fraud, or coercion for commercial sexual exploitation or forced labor. Now, like I said, if you're under the age of 18, they don't have to prove that force, fraud, or coercion took place because you cannot give consent. If you're over the age of 18, that's where legally they do have to go in and build that case. That's why sometimes you might see, public cases that are taking a while because they're having to build that case to show that force, fraud, or coercion took place. But if you did any of those actions, you can be charged with human trafficking, even if you just drove the individual from one place to the other. If you transported, like I said, if you bought, if you housed someone that was being trafficked, those are all you can be charged. Now, it is happening globally, and it's also happening locally. These are statistics. They are a little old. I will admit that. It's interesting. 4 years is a big difference, But one thing I want to note: 79,000 minors and youth. Now, that's just in the state of Texas. Now, you have to think globally and locally. Like, no one is going around raising their hand saying, like, count me in your statistics. These are just tangible numbers that they can show that these are actual victims of trafficking. So 313,000 victims in the state of Texas, $150 billion industry. And that's annual. And a lot of individuals have gone to trafficking because it makes it's more profitable. You think about selling drugs and how you have to provide another drug in order to sell it, whereas a person can be sold over and over and over. And so that is what we're also fighting, is the fact that individuals are moving to this because of the profit. They don't, of course, see the fact that people have value, unfortunately. The human trafficking versus smuggling. So we do hear that, like, some confusion in that, especially in the state of Texas. Human trafficking is a crime against a person, whereas smuggling is a crime against the border. Now, like I've said it over and over, it's here, it's happening. But an individual can be transported, and they can also be trafficked from a home. So we do hear about cases where individuals, they were transported across a couple of different states. We show here the Texas Triangle, which, as you can see, it's along those interstates. Those interstates allow people to get places fast, and so individuals can be moved around from place to place. But we also have cases where an individual was sold out of a house and they never were moved around. So it can happen in both scenarios. It does happen to students. It does say on here the average age is 15, but I really feel like that can vary depending on where you live. But we do see minors being, getting exploited into human trafficking. It can happen in different forms. We see child pornography, live videos. There's familial trafficking. That's where a family member would be selling another family member. It can happen in strip clubs. In strip clubs, so much of even like our like Hollywood and movies, they promote these as being like, oh, you just go to the strip club and like it makes it sound like this entertainment opportunity for everyone to just, that's what they do. And really and truly, man, trafficking is happening in big quantities at these strip clubs. And also labor trafficking, being forced to work and also being sold outside of their shift. But they also have young people working there. They have minors working at these strip clubs, and people don't realize that individuals are being brought in because they think, hey, I can make a lot of money doing this, and they're a minor. They can be sold on the streets, and we also do see, sold online, as well as gang-related trafficking happening. Now, here's one of the videos. We're going to try to watch this, and hopefully it happens, and you can hear it. Like I said, if you're not able to, you can come back and watch it at a later time. I've got it pulled up already on my computer, but it is through the FBI, and it's the Seattle sex trafficking victim shares her story. I just thought this would be a good way for you to understand how easily a child can get pulled into a trafficking situation.
He said that I would make $20 million from the documentary, and that it was, if porn was legal, then escorting and prostitution should be legal too. And that once it aired or whatever, that I would and all the other girls would get $20 million each. When I met them, I was a senior. I was a gymnast and I was doing gymnastics. I wouldn't say I was a shy person in high school, but I didn't really talk about relationships or anything, and so I kind of just went on there to meet people and possibly find a relationship, who knows. I can't remember what she really like said exactly, but I know she was just friendly and kind of pursuing in some way that she was a nice person and, you know, actually genuinely cared and wanted to get to know me. Well, at first, they treated me very well. David bought me things and bought coffee and just treated me like a friend, I should say. Like a good friend. You would think it was a nice person. They took me to, like, I mean, hotels and stuff just for fun at the beginning. I just thought that, oh, I have a lot of money and I'll be around people that care about me. I just thought that sounded great. And maybe a month after meeting them, it kind of got to the point where they slowly introduced the whole escorting or prostitution phase, whatever you want to call it. I think I was kind of just in shock and I didn't really know what to think of it. And I just wanted to be cared about and I wanted a person to care about me and to be loved. So at that point, I just didn't really know what to do. I think it was about 5 or 6 months after living with them. In November of 2014, I called my mom. She obviously jumped on it of like, oh, you want to come home, great. And she knew that I needed to get out of the situation. They were not there at the time, so that's how I got out. They had scheduled some man to come over that night, but I had decided before that person comes over that I was gonna, you know, get on it and actually leave. So that's what I did.
Okay, so let me get back over here to the presentation. So as you can see, it's so easy, especially you think about when you're young like that, you're wanting to, you know, go out on your own, be independent, you want to be loved, you want someone to care about you, you want to make money, and these traffickers understand that and they know how to use that to manipulate young people. And you know, even you think about right now, just even on like YouTube, and you know, you talk to young kids and you're like, oh, what do you want to do when you grow up? They're like, I want to be a YouTuber. And although that can happen for a very, very, very small few percentage of our population, a majority are going to have to go and do other things in life. And, you know, if someone's like, hey, I can make you a star, things like that, it feeds into that desire that they have to become rich and famous. And so, like I said, you see how easily someone can be manipulated into that. Now, I do want to talk here about the difference between child sex trafficking and sexual exploitation. So sex trafficking is that exchange of something of value. So they're performing sexual services in exchange for something of value, where sexual exploitation is you're being forced, lied to, threatened, or coerced into performing sexual services. Now, exploitation can lead to trafficking. So that's, you know, that's what we see, where they're being exploited over and over, and eventually they'll be trafficked. I put this graphic here about a model. We see that happen frequently, where there's ads out there saying, you know, become a model, and individuals respond to that and think it's going to be a legit career opportunity. And especially everybody wants to be beautiful, especially with our phones and all of the, you know, all the ways that we can make ourselves just look glamorous. You know, individuals want that. They desire that, and they get into these situations, and it might start off as like, hey, here's do a few sessions, and by the way we move forward in this is you got to have some money. So how about work at the strip club over here for a little bit, make some money. All the girls do it. They make it sound like it's no big deal, that they just go over here and make some money, and then that's where they get hooked into the trafficking aspect of things. There are risk factors, and this right here has it kind of divided out. One thing I will say, anyone, it doesn't matter where you're from, who you are, anyone can be a victim of trafficking. And you know, I've said this over and over, but when you're on the internet, it really even amplifies, you know, the fact that you could be a potential victim of trafficking. There are certain things, though, that can increase your risk of being trafficked. And these are broken out into the orange, and then the black ones are listed. But the reason these are in orange is because it puts an individual at a higher risk of being trafficked. So you think about a runaway, they're you know, going from, you know, couch to couch. Someone can come in there and say, hey, I've got a place for you to stay. And so they can be taken advantage of. We've got homelessness, which is a huge way to be trafficked. LGBTQ, and the reason we note that is because individuals can be kicked out of their home for coming out as LGBTQ. They also have a sense of, you know, that people don't understand, and when somebody comes up and they're saying like, hey, you know, like, I'll take care of you, and that can just create a tie there that can lead into some exploitation or trafficking. We also have child sexual abuse, chronic abuse or neglect, learning disabilities, and developmental delays. But you know, all of these things are places where individuals might feel like I'm not understood, and you know, and that can lead to a vulnerability of being trafficked. Okay, so runaways and homeless youth. So according to Polaris, a survey, 64% of survivors reported being homeless during the time that they were recruited into trafficking. So 64% of them were homeless. And of course, shelter, a place to stay, was a technique that they used to get them lured in. And it is true that sex trafficking recruitment can happen in shelters and group homes and domestic violence shelters, things like that. So there are recruiters that go into those places looking for victims. 64% of survivors also reported that the lack of affordable housing was a barrier. Don't we all know that housing is expensive? And if you think about a person who's struggling to make money, that's going to be a huge barrier for sure. And it is one of the greatest needs for trafficking survivors, is a place to stay, a place to go. Once they've gotten out of that situation, they need somewhere to go where they can start that healing journey. And so it's definitely needed. One thing I want to note, there's a myth out there that this only happens to girls or women, but it also happens to boys. We have victims who are boys, and even here locally. And so we don't want it to go unsaid. You know, we want individuals to understand this. Of course, the risk factors are homelessness, time spent in foster care, sexual orientation. And some of the differences that are involved here is a male is more prone to be involved in what we call survival sex, which is what they're doing anything in order to get by. And they're less likely to have a pimp that is controlling them. And of course, there's lower rates of identification. You think about how difficult that would be for a male to come forward and say that they are being trafficked, or even know that, what that means. Recruiters are the individuals that go and find these victims. They can be in different parts of society. They could be at schools. They can go into the shelters, like I talked about before. They're at different areas where they can find potential victims. I do want to note here, there's been a lot of communication on social media about, like, I was at a store and this person was following me around, and then I saw this van circling around in the parking lot and I knew that they were going to capture me. I do want to point out on that of course, when you're shopping and you're out in public, you always need to be aware of what's happening around you. Individuals can, you might be carrying a nice purse, or you might have your wallet out and someone sees cash in it. So someone can take advantage of you in those situations, but human trafficking does not look as much like snatch and grab that it is portrayed. It's very, very, that happening is just very rare. More, you need to be on the lookout for the smooth talking individual who, specifically someone smooth talking online or something of that sort. They're not one to stand out. Recruiters and or traffickers are not going to stand out in public. They want to just be, kind of mold in with everybody else. So whenever you hear of things like that, it could be a situation where maybe that individual was, I'm not saying that something wasn't going to happen to that individual, but trafficking is just a very unlikely scenario there. But they do hang out at these areas. You might see at a school, like an older girl investing in a younger girl, or or an older guy investing into time into a younger girl, that kind of thing. Recruitment methods. This is kind of what I was talking about. The romantic situation marriage proposal is by far the biggest recruitment method. And of course, everybody wants somebody to love them and be accepting of them. And so, when an older guy or whatnot is giving you attention and wanting to be your boyfriend, of course, that seems like a great thing that's happening in your life until they start exploiting you. We have the benefactor. That's what the guy was in the video that Lauren was talking about. Like, the guy was going to take care of her, was going to pay her all this money. They also have a job advertisement. That would be like the modeling situation that I talked about earlier. We have the family related, and of course the abduction, forced kidnapping is very rare. It can happen. I don't want to say it doesn't happen, but it's just a rare thing that it does. We kind of saw this play out with Lauren's story that we watched, where it was a grooming method. This is a 6-step process that John Clark with Operation Texas Shield kind of rolled out as to what trafficking can look like as they get to know an individual. And so they'll start with that befriending. Then they'll move to intoxicating, so they'll introduce the individual to, like, maybe alcohol or just some drugs, kind of like marijuana, just kind of getting them into what, doing things that are not good, but at the same time, it's not like harsh criminal activity or anything like that. They'll start the alienation process and isolation. They're going to try to pull them away from family and friends. Where that individual no longer wants to be around the people who love them. They, will act let's say that the recruiter comes into the home, they'll act like all, nice and, oh, Mr. and Mrs. and yet outside of that saying, your parents are awful, like they're trying to control you. And so they're pulling that individual away from the scenario. So if you see that happening, if you see that playing out in your home where the person is really nice when you meet them, but yet your child or whoever you're guardian of is not wanting to be around you and that kind of thing, that can be some red flags. There's the desensitizing. So what they're going to do there is they're going to be showing, maybe they'll be shown pornographic images or pornography in general, like videos, to desensitize their minds. And let me point out here right now that pornography, that's what pornography is used for. It's to desensitize minors, so that when a client comes in, they know what they're supposed to do. And so, and when I say minors, that I'm even below the age of 10, they're being shown pornographic images, and that's what it's used for. The other part that they will be shown is they'll be put in situations where they're around someone that's, being sold, and so it also creates that desensitizing process, as well as they go into the capitalization process, where it's like, okay, now it's your turn to be a part of this. So how do they trap their victims? There's a couple of different things, techniques that are used. This top left one, we call that guerrilla pimping. So they're going to be very, very physical. They're going to beat who they're with. Like they're, even if that individual's not even doing anything, they're going to be beaten a lot into submission so that they create that fear, so the person won't run or do anything wrong. You have the daddy figure, like I can make all your problems go away, trying to solve all the world's problems, and that person is like, oh, I need to stick with this person because they'll always take care of me. We also have where it's, just the friendship of, like maybe a roommate situation, and the roommate starts exploiting the other roommate. That can happen. We have, of course, the romantic aspect of it. Your boyfriend can start exploiting you or your partner. Let's see, what to look for. So these are, a lot of people are like, so what do I look for here? Let's look at this, because this is the big thing right here. So we're going to start seeing truancy from school, a change in the academic performance. They're going to be having a change in behavior, the way they interact in their relationships with individuals. They're going to also have new items, like like really nice things that they have no money to afford, all of a sudden appearing. And they're also going to be hanging out with like older kids or older individuals, and it could be boy or girl. They're going to be running away from home, traveling a lot. They're their ID and things like that, they're not always going to have readily available on them because they don't have it. Somebody else has it. It could be drug use or gang involvement. They're, specifically in that guerrilla pimping, or even, just trafficking in general. When someone is sold into sex trafficking, it's very violent. It's not, you have to think like individuals are being bought, and they can do whatever they want to that individual during the time that they have them. So when they're sold, they're beaten, and so they're going to have physical marks on them. They're going to be hyper aware, hyper aroused, and so they're constantly looking around them, that kind of thing. They of course might you could see this where like they have slips of paper with names and phone numbers on them, which with dollar amounts. That's the key there, is that there's dollar amounts. Hotel card, 16-year-old having a hotel card is not, that's definitely a red flag. And any involvement in commercial sex industry, if they're at a strip club, then that is definitely a red flag. Some of the barriers that are going to be involved in identification, you have to think too, like this is, like there's shame involved in this, and there's also the fact that, yeah, you may not even understand what's happening to you, So there's going to be fear of being believed, that the trafficker may be telling them, I'm the only one who loves you. No one else will ever love you like I do. Or if you try to leave, I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to find you. I'm going to hurt your family. They're also going to tell them, that they will be arrested and put in jail, will be put in foster care. And so there is, this individual's being fed all of these lies. And so we actually, when we talk about someone, a victim who is coming out of a trafficking situation, we have actually stopped referring to rescuing the individual. Because if you think about it, like we really, these individuals are being empowered with knowledge to leave that situation. Okay. When you look at rescuing an individual in a situation like that, they're having to overcome all of these thoughts of no one else loves me except for this guy that's been taking care of me. There's a lot of unknowns in all of that, and so they're having to put trust in someone else to get out of that situation. And so I just want to note that we've actually refrained from using the word rescue in that term, and we just, that individual is empowered with knowledge to get out of that situation. They're having to trust. So anyway, those are going to be big barriers to identification of victims. Now, this is more for the individuals working on staff there at Gladney. It can be a little tricky to know what are appropriate questions to ask. And this just kind of gives you some ground to kind of get a feel for what might be happening to that individual, because they might not be trafficked, but they might be in a violent situation that that they need help getting out of. So sometimes kids are in a position where they really need money, drugs, food, or a place to stay. Have you ever traded sex for money, drugs, a place to stay, a cell phone, or something else? So what you're trying to do is minimize, it's just kind of a normal thing for the, like not normal, but it's not a shocking thing for this to happen. So you don't want kids feeling like the questions that you're asking them are like, no one ever does this, and why are you doing this? That kind of question. So kind of easing into that process. I will say that if you're a member of the general public or anything like that, it's best for you to refer to a professional to ask these questions. You can call law enforcement, things of, CPS, things of that sort, and allow them to answer these questions. But I did, for Gladney staff and other social service providers, I did want to provide these as something that you can ask before you move forward with your organization's protocol to understand what could potentially be happening in this situation. Has a boyfriend, girlfriend, or anyone ever asked you or forced you to do something sexual with another person? So that's a question that can help you determine if they want to respond to that, how to make next steps. All right, best practices. If you're ever in a situation where language is a barrier, specifically for a child that doesn't speak English very well, please do not use a family member or someone they know as the interpreter, always have a professional interpreter come in, because that person that they're with could be their trafficker. Always use the same words that the individual is using and don't correct what they're saying. So if they say my daddy or my boyfriend, don't go, oh, you mean your trafficker? You just want to use the same thing that they do. Don't ever act shocked of what someone is telling you. There's some horrendous things that happen to individuals, and it's hard to hear, but you cannot act shocked when they tell you this information. Just kind of like, you know, understand what they're telling you, shake your head that you understand what they're saying. Use a trauma-informed response. Remember that the individuals you're talking with, they might be cussing you out while they are talking to you. They or they might not be talking at all, and they could be very quiet. And just know that that individual has been through a lot of trauma, and the way that is coming out, you know, that's how that is coming out. And then, of course, don't share information with unauthorized individuals. So, you know, if you have a coworker at work, unless they're one of the people that need to know for your protocol, don't be sharing information with people at work or friends or family. You can have a situation where, you know, like you could tell, this is what we don't want to happen, is you're telling someone outside of your family, and then that family member doesn't realize, oh, I don't need to share this information, and then they start sharing it with other people, and before you know it, a child's case information is getting out. And so keep information just within the people who need to know what's going on. All right, what do victims and survivors need to know? They need to know there is a way out. You know, I mentioned at the very beginning, there is hope in this, and that is what they need to understand, is that someone is out there looking for them. Someone wants to help them, and so there is a way out. Communicate hope. Individuals have rights. They're not to blame, and they are entitled to services and help. Now, if you ever have a reason to believe a minor is abused, trafficked, or neglected, you must follow mandatory reporting, which I'm sure you're all very aware of, but you must follow those guidelines. What not to do? Ooh, this is a big one, because you know, in situations where we come across an individual that has been exploited or trafficked, you kind of have that sense of wanting to, what we said, rescue the individual, and that's definitely not what you want to do, because you don't know what's going to happen in that situation. You may not be able to get them out as soon as you would like, or anything like that, so you can't, you know, do that rescue type situation. Don't make promises that you can't keep, and don't use the, you know, device or deceit or coercion or anything like that in an effort to save them. Don't use what's been used against them to try to save them out of that situation. Now, one of the things that we've had a lot of conversation with recently in the high schools is sexting, and it's actually a very common thing that high school students do, and even middle school students do, because they're learning through our society that that's how you have a relationship with someone, is you send images to your partner. And so this is becoming a very common occurrence, something that you know, that when we go into high schools, they're not shocked by it by any means. So let's take a look at what this looks like virtually. So 45% of people entering life said that they met their trafficker face-to-face, and 45% met face-to-face, 55% met online. So majority are meeting online. This is another video we're gonna watch, and I apologize, she's very quiet in her talking, but I'm gonna try to make it where you can hear it. Let's see.
I first got MySpace when I was in 5th grade, and my mom was on top of that all the time, and stranger danger. and whatnot, and just don't talk to strangers and people you don't know. And then, so there's always that fear in my head, but nothing too, this could never happen to me. I'm Ashley, this can't happen to me, I'm normal. But little did I know that I ended up getting terrorized, is the only way I can think of it, by this guy. I just remember getting this message that the subject line said something about naked pictures and that he has of me. I ignored it. I didn't know who he was. I didn't want to answer it or even open it up. It was never me believing that he was some charming 16-year-old older boy or something that I could be talking to make a relationship out of. It was never like that. It was pure business, it felt like it was an exchange. I gave him the pictures and I got to keep my reputation. He was not going to stop, and he was set on sharing my picture with whoever he could to ruin my reputation. Felt like a slave. I had to make sure I replied to every message. I had to give him like an explanation. I feel like, why wasn't I replying? And then my lies of everything and what I was doing and whatnot, and then having him know, I'm sorry, I have school in the morning, I have to do this, I'm at school till this time. And then I'd have my nights where I just felt, I just felt depressed. I remember just laying in bed with silence and just thinking, and I felt like God was so disappointed in me. I didn't know like what to do, but I wouldn't get home till late at night, and then I'd have to send him all these pictures. And as I'm doing this, he would be like, no, this isn't right. This one's blurry, or you didn't do this right. You weren't doing it right. You got to do it again. So, and that's where being a slave to him comes in, because I had to make sure I complied, and I sent him all this because, one, maybe tomorrow I'll get a break. I'll get a day off tomorrow if I just do all these right, which I never wanted to send them or like give him what he wanted, but I wanted my freedom, I guess. So I figured the only way to do that is if I do it right, but nothing was ever right. I didn't even want to believe what I was doing, and I would just feel, it would be so awkward. Like I don't even like telling my parents. I'm 20. I don't like telling my parents if I have a boyfriend or not. So it's like, I mean, I'm a quiet person. I keep my business to myself, but I just didn't want my parents to be disappointed in me. I can't. It's just embarrassing to talk about. I still remember going into the bedroom where the computer was when my parents sat me down, and I was like, it was like instant like panic attack. Like my heart and stomach was just, I was like, I don't know what to do right now. Like, how am I going to explain this? And then I got brought into the room and had to come clean once my mom showed me the messages that she saw. That was a relief. It took me a while to realize it was a relief. At first it was embarrassment and like awkward and crying, and I was afraid because I didn't want to go to jail for sexting. And then at least someone knew, and there's no way to describe like just having someone know, and like I'm free, I guess. I don't even have to go into detail to say like what I went through. Just knowing that someone else knows, that someone else is aware that I'm not the only one who knows what I've been doing. It's bricks off of your back. Oh, as awkward as it could be for depending on how close you are with your parents, you're gonna feel that awkward. That's heaven compared to feeling alone and closed and by yourself. But I just wish there were like available outlets for a 14-year-old's brain if they're too afraid to go to their parents, because they don't want to go to their parents and tell them what's happening to them. So if they had a different way to go about it, then I think that would make it a lot more comfortable, and it would kind of get the ball rolling for them and to put an end to what they're going through. This is something that came into my life, and as horrible and bad as it is, I know that like I can help. Like how people want to be like a doctor and save someone. Like I want to help someone who's in this situation that gets overlooked all the time. It's just, we weren't raped. We're overlooked because nobody actually touched us. I don't want anyone to feel bad for me. Like I don't need anyone to feel bad for me. I feel like don't feel like, use that energy and just get the word out.
All right, hopefully you guys were able to hear that better. I tried putting my microphone up to the speaker in hopes that that would help. Let me get back over here to the presentation. All right, so I when I think about the kids who are involved in sexting right now, just our youth, none of them go into it thinking, that they're going to be exploited or that it could be used as sextortion or anything like that. Like, they innocently go into it because they think that that's what relationships look like. And that's something that our organization has been going into schools and really kind of talking about what does a healthy relationship look like. And kids don't realize too that they can get in a lot of legal trouble if they are involved in sexting, and because it's against the law. And so they, like I said, they're innocently doing it, but they can really get themselves into some trouble. I think they also forget too that, once that is sent from their phone, then it's gone. Even if the legal troubles never happen or anything like that, like, what goes out there is out there forever. And so it makes it super, like, we go into a lot of schools and we talk, like, we hear stories of and I will say this, like, almost every high school we go to, they know of at least one kid in their school that has had, what we would call, like, some images were sent out across the school of that individual. And so it happens everywhere. And something I did want to note was the differences. So there's sexting, sextortion, and aggravated sexting. So sexting, of course, is sending the images back and forth. Sextortion is more of a revenge ploy where they're exploiting that person to get more images, and so it's a non-physical form, and but they're saying, hey, if you don't send me more images, I'm going to send this to everyone and then we have aggravated sexting where they've asked the individual to stop, and the perpetrator keeps sending those images over and over. So in the state of Texas, these are the laws regarding all of this. So the one thing I want to mention is the sexting between minors. So if two individuals who are under the age of 18 are sending images back and forth to each other, intentionally or unintentionally or unknowingly, if it's an obscene pic, video, or anything of that sort, then it can be a misdemeanor in the state of Texas. And like I said, a lot of kids don't understand that, and that's why when we talk about like, if one of your kids ever receives an image on their phone that somebody was just forwarding it around to different kids at school, don't ever take that picture and forward it to your phone to show police or anything like that, because then it can get your child in trouble because they just forwarded a picture to another phone. So leave it and call the authorities in that situation. We do have, if an adult is sexting with a minor, then that is going to be against the law as far as like promotion, like child pornography, things of that sort. So that's a felony charge in that situation. Let's see. So also, here's just the House Bill 2789, and that's just sending explicit material across, across your phone and whatnot. And so all that to say is that it's really important for kids to understand the legal aspect of why they should not be doing this. So if you have a minor that is involved in sexting, have a conversation with them. Or even if you have one that you know that might not be involved in sexting, you just need to have this conversation with them. Ask them what they think about it, because it may not be a big deal to them. Ask them if they've ever felt pressured to send a message, and if they know what happens to that message. They may think, oh, I just send it to my boyfriend, or I just send it to my girlfriend, and they don't think about the fact that they're not there with that individual when they receive it. They don't know who it's being shown to or who it's being forwarded to. So they put that trust to think that that person's not going to do anything to it. So having that conversation with them, explain those consequences of what can happen, and then create a plan with this child, to talk about what does a healthy relationship look like, and to have a safe person to talk to, if they feel like something is not going right. Each kid, when we go to talk to parents and such at schools, like PTAs and things like that, we always talk about, make sure your child has a safe person to talk to, whether that's the parent or someone at school. They need a safe person to talk to, when something is wrong. And also going into that is, think about your response as well when a young person comes to you and something has happened online. Your response is so critical, because that means whether or not they're going to come back again. So if let's say your daughter comes to you and says, this just happened on this website, and your response is, what are you doing on that website? Why are you, like, I told you never to do that, and you're angry, they're less likely to come back to you when something happens again. And anytime they're online, that things are going to happen. But if your response is, hey, let's look at this together and see what's going on, like, work through it, even if you are upset because they were doing something they weren't supposed to do, having that cool, calm, collective response is going to help them know that they can come back and trust that you will help them in another situation. So people ask, okay, well, then how does this correlate to human trafficking? So if a minor is involved and that picture is sent, and then that picture is sold by the person who they sent it to, then that can become a trafficking situation. Now, as I mentioned before, with an adult, they do have to prove that force, fraud, or coercion took place. But if something is being exchanged for that image, then of course, then it starts getting into the trafficking situation. So how can you help? All right, keep yourself educated. Make sure when you are getting information about trafficking that you're using reputable resources. Your friend sharing something on Facebook does not mean that that is absolute fact. Anytime there's like the recent one has been the Wayfair information that came out. And I'm going to share this. A good resource that you can always look at is the McLennan County Sheriff's Office. They have a very active group in human trafficking and stopping human trafficking, and so they'll address things like that. Whether it's them or other, sheriff's office or law enforcement. But I do know McLennan County, which is down in Waco, they did have a response to the Wayfair situation, and so use those resources to get your facts when situations like that come out. Also, continue to have those conversations about trafficking and online safety. Create plans with youth. Make sure they have that safe person. And respond if something doesn't seem right. There's always that gut feeling that something's not right, and it may not be trafficking. It could be any kind of another form of abuse, but react when something doesn't seem right. Now, I've waited till the very end to tell you about Unbound, because sometimes it feels like it's easier to understand what we do when you have kind of an idea of what all is involved in human trafficking. So the number one thing we do is we work with survivors of trafficking. So what that looks like, we're 24/7 response. So we can get a call from law enforcement or the hospital or whoever it might be, CPS. And what we do is we respond within the hour, and we come with a backpack full of like a blanket, arts and crafts, a pair of socks, just kind of some necessary items. And we meet with that individual and we start the process of figuring out what their needs are. So of course, when we're dealing with a minor, we allow law enforcement and CPS to do what they need to do. We're not going to interfere in them taking care of what they need to take care of. But we are going to be there to help that individual with finding, maybe they need, they need to have a long-term placement, or an emergency shelter or something like that. We're going to be with that child every step of the way. And so it could, it could be 6 months to 2 years. It really just depends on the situation. But we are helping walk them through the steps of healing and making sure that they have the resources that they need. There's a lot of amazing resources and social service organizations out there that we just need to help them connect, and sometimes they just need someone to help in that process, and that's what we're there for. In adults, it looks differently because law enforcement or might not be involved in that situation. It may be just somebody trying to get out of a situation where they're being trafficked, but we're there through that whole situation as well. So if they need medical attention, if they like I said, need long-term placement, things like that, we're there to help them. We also provide professional training. We do this training for school staff, for healthcare professionals, for social service providers. And we're teaching them what are the red flags to look for and how to respond in those situations. And then we go out into the community and do prevention and awareness. We have our Keeping Students Safe program. We talk with kids about what is human trafficking and what they can do to keep themselves safe. We also go into the community and just talk in general about human trafficking and what it looks like. So something I did want to mention is that this fall we're going to be opening the drop-ins. Well, it's actually called the Underground, but it's a drop-in center for youth, and it's going to be at one safe place down in the hospital district, and so it's going to be a place. It's a temporary place to rest while we're figuring out next steps. So currently, let's say a minor has been identified as a trafficking victim. Right now, the place that law enforcement will most likely take them is to the detention center, because there's not really a in-between place to house them while we're figuring out those next steps. So what this is going to provide, it's going to have like cots and things where they can lay down and rest, because trafficking is not a 8 to 5 thing. So 2 o'clock in the morning, it will be a great place to have to take someone so that they can rest while we're figuring out what we're going to do next. There's going to be advocates on site 24/7. There's going to be a dog. His name's Wilbur. He's going to be amazing. I'm really excited about that part. There's going to be gaming consoles. There's books, food they can eat. It's not a long-term thing. It's really just figuring out what next steps we need to take in that process. So We're very excited about this. So if you hear about the underground, that's what this is going to be. So it's going to be serving minors and youth up to age 22. Here is some contact information for Unbound. We have our office number here at the top, the 668-6544. If you ever need someone to come do a presentation, you can call that number. I will also have my number and email and everything here in just a moment where you can see it. We have our 24/7 referral line, so crisis or non-crisis, at 668-6462. Our website, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which is always a default that you can use to contact if you see something that doesn't look right, like a trafficking situation that you think it might be a trafficking situation. We have the Fort Worth PD Human Trafficking Unit information, as well as the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office Human Trafficking Unit contact information. And of course, in any situation, if it's a dangerous situation, please call 911 and notify law enforcement. Here is my contact information. So if you would like us to do, right now, of course, we're doing lots of webinars or Zoom calls and whatnot. So if you'd like to schedule a presentation, we'd be more than happy to do that. We can do presentations for kids, for adults. We do prefer on the kids that they are middle school or higher. Oops, sorry, I just hit my microphone. Wake everybody up. And so, we like I said, we try to stay above that middle school age, but we also can do adult groups, things of that sort. So call us if you have, if you'd like us to come and speak. I am going to do some questions here in just a moment, but I do have some scenarios here that I wanted to walk through, just because it's good to kind of wrap up what you just learned. So the scenario is a 15-year-old girl attends a pool party and is photographed while changing into her swimsuit. The photos ranged from near nude to completely nude and were distributed to 30 kids on her school campus. Eventually, law enforcement became involved, but students acknowledged there are images of the girl still on phones and devices of other students. If you are a parent and find one of these pictures on your child's phone, how do you respond? I'm going to open up the comments section. Let's see if I was going to look and see what people say, how they feel like they would respond in that situation. I think I can, let me see if I can see
Larinda, they're going to have to put it in the chat and then you'll see it pop up as a question mark. Do you see that?
Let's see here.
I can
maybe
read them
not.
off.
That's okay. We may not do it that way, but
Read them off.
Yeah, Jenny can read them for you.
Okay.
So we have somebody that says call the police.
Okay. That's yes.
That's it so far.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. Sorry. Go to the police with the child's phone or device. The person would have to contact the authorities.
Yes. Yes. And what we're not going to do is we're not going to forward that picture to another phone. Definitely call the authorities though and let them know what's going on. Thank you for those that did respond on that. All right, we're going to look at another scenario. Let's see here. See if I can get my, there we go. Okay, let me move this box. You are talking to a 13-year-old boy who says he has a girlfriend in another state that he met online. How do you respond?
We'll give you guys just a few minutes or a few seconds to write that down.
Trying to see if I can still find how to see this response.
So it's on your taskbar under questions. We have somebody that says, ask him for more information in a conversational tone. Tell me more. How did you meet? What kinds of things do you talk about? Tell him
Yes.
he is, oh. Tell him he is likely a gross old man.
Well, the chances are it could be that situation.
Yeah.
And I think making kids aware that could be a situation, like it may not be their situation, of course, but that making sure kids know, like, hey, just because the profile picture says this, and this is what the name is, that does not mean that that individual is who they say they are. We've seen situations where there was a grandfather who was posing as his granddaughter, and you know meeting her, friends of friends, on their Instagram or whatever it was, social media, and that's how he was, getting connected to these kids, and they're just thinking they're talking to a girl that's at the other school in their town. Law enforcement has told us before, the dangerous situations online are when you're connecting with friends of friends or relatives of friends, things like that. Oh, it's my best friend's cousin, or it's my big brother's friend, that kind of situation. That's where there's some dangers that can lie, because it's this false sense of safety, because you feel like the person. I can even say with my niece, like I've gone through her social media account before with her, and it's like, well, who is this individual? And it's like, oh, I think they work at my school. And it's like, okay, well, an adult doesn't need to be friends with you on your social media account. So, it's things like that, having those kinds of conversations with the kids, and really watching what they're doing while they're online.
Yeah.
Did we have any other responses during that time?
So somebody suggested have you FaceTime with them. And so if they're not going to FaceTime with you, then that's kind of a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
And then ask what platform they met on. So what
Yeah.
type of social media? Was it, Xbox? Was it Facebook? Different kinds of things like that.
Right.
Don't freak out. Ask
Yeah.
a lot of questions. Yeah.
Definitely don't freak out.
Yeah. So a lot of don't freak out kind of things.
Mhm.
Yeah. Build rapport. Make sure that you're keeping your game face on.
Right. Yeah, and even, I've talked to, there was a local school where I talked to the fifth graders there, and they're very, for them to meet someone online is very common. And they were saying that some of the things that they do is they use the emoji faces, or I can't remember what they're called, like Snapchat and stuff like that, where you can hide what your face looks like as you're having a conversation with someone. So, that is even something that that's common for that to happen. And we also, just a little side note here too, in talking with kids, is that their profile picture doesn't need to give away any information of who they are. So they need to have, like, if they have a picture of themselves that it doesn't show, their school colors or their school name, or who they are, like have a flower or an emoji picture that doesn't even look like them. And I know that's hard because they want so badly to do whatever their friends are doing, and it's all about the likes and things like that. And it's hard. It's so hard to have these conversations with kids, and them, and there's usually some pain and suffering on both parts, but ultimately it's for the benefit of the kids. And like I said, as long as you're having those conversations, it makes things easier, in the long run. Okay, and I think, let's see, how are we on time? We've got some time for some questions, if you have any questions.
We don't have any questions. There was, if you guys want to start putting questions in the comments, we can start asking those. We did have somebody have a comment earlier.
Okay.
Said language is so important in the video, talking about the first video. They said luring women, but underage is a child. To me, even 18 to 23 can be a child based on their maturity level.
Right. Yes. So, and that's a interesting comment, because I completely agree. Like, you know, unfortunately, it is that legally we see 18 as being this beautiful age where you're able to like make adult decisions and, you know, you know, that kind of thing. But unfortunately, you know, a lot of times when we identify these individuals, they are past the age of 18, but they've been trafficked since they were a minor. And so, and since they are over the age of 18, you do have to prove that the force, fraud, or coercion has taken place in their trafficking situation. But we do see that quite often. And so we do have programs, though, that are there to help kids during that transitional time. I mean, it's like the drop-in center. We can go up to age 22. And so I think people understand, when I say people, state programs and things like that understand that, you know, they need assistance up into that age bracket.
Does it change if that child or if that adult has a disability or developmental delay or any cognitive issues? Does that then become a little bit different of a scenario?
It's ooh, I would that is a Tommy might actually be able to answer that question better than I on that one. But of course, I think you know, it depends on the situation at hand. You know, everyone is at such different levels. You know, when it comes to cognitive and you know, disabilities and things like that. So
there
Tommy,
are specialized charges. Yeah, there's specialized charges for developmental disabilities that can be charged. And that's been done at the federal level for sure. There's been some prosecutions for labor trafficking specifically.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tommy.
Sure.
Any other questions that you guys have? Larinda, I am like stoked about that new facility that you guys have. Yes. That looks beautiful.
We're so excited. Oh, and you know, there's other cities that have these already, and Fort Worth needed one so bad. So we are excited it's moving forward, and we're very thankful. We've had such great support in the community. We're thankful to One Safe Place for allowing us to put this at their facility, and so we're excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we will make sure that we get the word out too to anybody that might, you know, work with a child or teenager, young adult for sure. Mm-hmm. Oh, somebody's asking, how many temporary residents can the facility accommodate? And when will it be opened?
Yeah, so our projected opening date is October 1st. We are still navigating, you know, I think at this point we're going to have one room that will have 3 cots and another room that will have 3 cots where we can separate certain individuals. And but as far as the capacity, I think they are still working through that.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, people are excited about that. Okay. So thank you, Larinda. That's awesome. I loved learning about all of that. I think some of that was review, but and some of that was actually new. So I think you gave us some really good things, strategies, and questions that we can ask that would actually open up that conversation versus just kind of shutting it down. So, all right. So our next presenter is Ms. Tommy Grover. She is going to talk about the same topic, just in a different form, kind of more of the, I'm assuming, legislative and legal aspects of trafficking and that kind of thing. So we will take just a short break just so that she can get her presentation up.
Okay, great. Well, greetings on behalf of the Office of the Governor. I am really excited to be presenting my portion of this training today. And, you know, all this wonderful bad news that seems to be what Larinda has delivered, I feel like she's taken the hard part of delivering the information to you today. And so I get to come in and tell you, you know, the answers that we have been seeing and have sought for the state of Texas in response to it, because it's such an egregious crime, and somebody ought to do something about it, right? That's what we think when we see this kind of bad news. Somebody ought to do something about this. And I'm really excited to tell you about what we've been doing at the Office of the Governor. And you may be totally unaware. We don't have a lot of PR out there, but we're doing what we can at the grassroots level in educating the community and the constituency all around our work, so that you know about what's happened with our team. I've also been doing a lot of work with Unbound in the Fort Worth and Denton area, because they've been our CSA advocates for quite some time. And so we did portions of this presentation for the Denton County Mental Health Group as well. And we're really advancing what we're doing together in a partnership. And it's very important to understand that that's how our work has proliferated across the state. So let me tell you just real quickly about what we are doing, as this is a public health pandemic. We're all living in a public health pandemic, but when it comes to commercial sexual exploitation of children, we believe this is a public health pandemic for our kids, and we are trying to address this holistically and comprehensively. So we have 5 basic strategies that were assigned by the legislature in 2015. And this team was created in the government code. So it shouldn't matter who's in the office of the governor. We just happen to be developed at a time when our governor has really taken this issue to the highest levels and created this team so that we could respond to the issues of child sex trafficking in our state with great holistic, comprehensive strategies. It also has one other piece besides the 5 that are listed. As the Lone Star State, of course, we had to have a logo that had had the star in the middle around our children, and we had the 5 major pieces. But what holds it all together is that what we do is research-based. So we're constantly collecting, analyzing, and disseminating information and incorporating that, infusing it into each of these 5 parts, which are the public-facing strategies that we articulate. So the protect piece has to do with prevention work, and Unbound, of course, is doing some work in our Tarrant County schools. They've had training that they've hosted, and we've had a lot of information that's come through them to the public locally, and that's been very, very helpful to what our work has been in the local community. But we work with larger agencies as well to do Texas Education Association. There's been some recent legislation that's required schools to add sex trafficking to their child abuse training and that kind of thing as well. The recognized piece, we're going to talk a lot more about that, because a great deal of what you're learning today is what do we know that we see and we haven't been able to recognize. We haven't had the right glasses on, if you will. And so I'm going to talk to you about the See It tool, which is the commercially sexually exploited identification tool that we can also do training on. The third piece is recovery. And when we talk about the recovery, it's what Larinda mentioned, is we're not in the rescue business. We're about offering opportunities like a buoy that we can throw out there to give opportunity for someone to have that option to step out of sex trafficking, because they're much more likely to stay out if they seek a way out on their own rather than us plucking them from a situation. Now that's different if it's a law enforcement operation and they're found in a hotel and they're in imminent danger, then of course law enforcement is going to extract them, but that's law enforcement's job, not general community members. And then the healing portion of this is how do we, for the long term, help them to overcome many of the challenges that Larinda talked about and the trauma bonds that traffickers often hold their victims in compliance through, and how do we help them to go through the stages of change? How do we help them with trust-based relational intervention? Many of you will probably be familiar with TCU's TBRI training, and we've brought that training to all of our drop-in centers, our emergency shelters, our long-term residential placement, and others who have been working in this space. And the last piece is bring justice. This is where we're helping to get law enforcement trained, to get district attorneys trained, judges trained, all the systems players to align with what it means to address this issue in a holistic and comprehensive way. So as a part of our work, we have a mission and vision. That's our big goals of seeing a state where children and youth are free from sexual exploitation. And we have a mission statement that is built around those 5 pieces that I've just articulated in the logo that I had brought forth. And we're in the process constantly of creating these partnerships that allow us to have a sustainable solution across our state, so that we're building locally to affect change for the entire state and what this looks like. So recognizing a commercially sexually exploited youth, which we call CSE. So the working definitions are, of course, the federal definitions, but our state definitions from our state statutes mirror this identically. And what we know that there's a whole lot more kids that are sexual abuse victims in our society. Metadata analysis says about 10% of all of our kids. And then sexually exploited, those that are being exploited either online or in person. And then the commercial sexual exploitation, that's the exchange of sexual abuse for something of value. So all commercially sexually exploited youth, CSE, is a form of sexual abuse, but not all sexual abuse is a commercial exchange. So there's a lot of popular misconceptions about what trafficking is, and some of those have already been covered by Larinda, but we have to recognize that it is not what the media might portray to us, and there are a lot of children who are suffering in silence that we have to be really cognizant of. Larinda did a great job describing this, and I'm not going to spend an extensive amount of time on it, but I do want to say that these kids may be hidden in plain sight, or they may be coming across our vantage point on different times in their journey through childhood, that if we recognize them early, we might be able to keep their trajectory from ending up looking like this young lady's. Also, we have to recognize that substance abuse is either a recruitment tool or a compliance tool, or both, and that often kiddos are using because they're needing to cope with the violence in the situation, or that they have a drug habit that they are trying to make sure that they have options for completing what they need with drug and alcohol use. So sometimes it is hard to understand how vulnerability, recruitment, and grooming happen, what that abuse and trauma bonding looks like. And for kiddos who get recruited into this, trauma bonding is a real and present reality for them. We often talk about trust-based relationships in the context of understanding that trauma bonding happens when attachment doesn't happen at home, or when there's disrupted attachment. If you haven't taken TBRI training, I highly recommend it, and it's currently being offered through TCU for free right now for the online version through the end of August. So run on down to TCU Child Development Center website, and I can get you the links for that if you need it, to get TBRI trained. I think it will revolutionize your thinking about how we deal with these kiddos and the options that we have to give them better opportunities to be empowered to find their way out of trafficking and out of abusive relationships. So sometimes we don't understand that there is adversity that comes to a child's life that presents itself through adverse childhood experiences. It may be abuse, neglect, or household dysfunction. And some of the assessments that are available for understanding adverse childhood experiences are at the Center for Youth Wellness. If you're not familiar with the work of Nadine Burke-Harris, she's a pediatrician. Nadine has done some of the most relevant studies on childhood adversity, looking at the child during childhood and what their engaged with, and not waiting for a retrospective, which is the original ACEs study of adults only. This is a very well done curriculum that's available, and it helps you to know how to assess a child's adversity in their childhood that's either a self-reported or a guardian reported, depending on the age of the child. And one of the other pieces that we've come to understand is that adverse childhood experiences often have roots in adverse community environments. So when we look at poverty, discrimination, the lack of opportunity, poor housing or affordability, all those things that are underneath the surface, they often have a manifestation in the fruit that comes into a child's life, which we have seen as adverse childhood experiences. Two of those that are most prevalent are homelessness and domestic violence. When we look at research for this particular adversity of homelessness and domestic violence, they rise to the top for those kiddos who are being sexually exploited. And Texas has its own challenges when it comes to adverse childhood experiences. The Meadows Mental Health Foundation says that all of our children are affected by adversity, but it's significantly more prevalent for children of color, children living in poverty, and families with lower education and less employment, and LGBT status. We talked about that earlier. Larinda talked about LGBTQ status as a risk factor, and the reason is often when they do come out, they're asked to leave their home, they're shunned, and we have been making sure that we are thinking through that as our strategy moves forward. So for our kids with ACEs, we know that the highest level of risk is those kiddos who are incarcerated, and oftentimes it's their victimization that leads to criminalization, and it's a pipeline to detention in our state. We're doing everything we can to make sure that kiddos who are commercially sexually exploited are not ending up in our juvenile justice system. And we have also had much success with our juvenile justice system, making more programs available if there's criminal activity that those kids are charged with, and there are options for them to have programmatic elements that would be other than straight detention. Again, Larinda covered the technology aspects of it. I had them post the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's website for you. Some of the best resources that are available are online through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and they're age appropriate. So there's research and resources there, but there's also NetSmarts for children and of various ages, and then resources for parents, law enforcement, and social workers. We also have the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's Texas office, who provides training. They do an excellent job with this, helping us to understand the risks that every child faces in the online space. And remember, a lot more children are online, and there's three things that really need to be in top of mind for you, is that people have access to them that have never had access to these kids before. They have access to others who they've never had access before. And their vulnerabilities are high because of the constant use and the constant grooming that's happening in that space. People are enticing them, people are luring them, people are trying to get them to engage in a variety of ways. So there's access there, and that's some anonymity or that catfishing or gaslighting that happens there. And it can turn really quickly when there are no parents or caregivers who are in that protective phase. So a lot of kids, they're like 3-year-olds. We give them a phone and we say, as if we're giving them the keys to the car, and say, keep it out of the ditches. And the reality is kids don't know how to keep themselves out of trouble. We don't know how to keep ourselves out of trouble most of the time, in finding those places where they could be recruited and groomed. And so there's the lack of protective factors, and we really need to help parents and caregivers to understand how to be more protective and proactive with that. And then the third piece is that it easily flips to criminal behavior, which Larinda covered in the exchange of pictures that often can lead to a quick criminalization for that child, and their predators are capitalizing on that. So social media, gaming, sexting, kids that are in social media and gaming are often being just constantly recruited. And the resistance factors or the protective factors are not there. We have to start building in resilience to this constant barrage. Some of the things we know that traffickers have a way to groom and bond with a child before they ever exploit them. And this picture is a little misleading. It looks like she is actually giving herself up for the good of the others. And the reality is, when we have trauma bonds and we have kiddos who are in fight, flight, freeze mode, there's also a fourth mode that Dr. Shannon Wolf has taught about in many locations, and she's an expert witness for HSI on victimology when it comes to trafficking. She said it's the fourth piece is the fawn, and we don't often see that, but when the person is not able to fight, flight, or freeze, then they often will just make it an option in their mind that coping is actually giving up or fawning. And sometimes that looks like trauma bonds with a trafficker, where they try to get so close to them that they're friending them as close as they possibly can so that their victimization is reduced, or at least in their mind it is, but it's another layer of trauma bonding where they just give up hope of ever getting out of the situation. So what is Texas doing? We've talked a lot about the problems, but let's talk about the solution. I began with, we have a process in place for a public health response. So let's look at what that includes. Texas is a diverse, and the problems that we have with trafficking are pretty enormous. And we know that one child is too many and necessitates a response. But when we're looking at the statewide systems, we have to be able to get them in alignment and prepare them so that whoever the children are that come across their purview of care, we have a response to. So we've been enhancing those statewide systems. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. We've been developing a regional continuum of care, and that's really the onus of my responsibility, is to make sure that we have implementation of local care coordination, locally owned and operated, and getting all the right players at the table. Care coordination is happening through the local Children's Advocacy Center, and they've been at the table developing working protocols that align with our state objectives and that regional approach to making sure that these kids are cared for. We've also been enhancing statewide response systems and have a mechanism by which the legislature said anybody who's working on trafficking will be on an advisory board, which includes all of DFPS's exploitation, DPS, Interdiction for Protection of Children, our Office of the Attorney General, and then all of the other state system, HHSC, and all of the Health and Human Services aspects in the state systems are aligning. And then we're working with non-governmental agencies, providing grants and funding and things like that. And Unbound in Fort Worth is one of our grantees for the work that they've been doing on a variety of levels. So this is the map about our state and our 5 regions that we developed. You'll notice the North Texas region, which is mine, is the 48 counties in that real pretty color. I think if you can see it like I can see it, it's kind of a periwinkle color. Those 48 counties are my responsibility to make sure we build out the local continuum of care, and we're currently working to educate Collin and Denton counties who are about to launch care coordination. We're still working in Tarrant County to refine the care coordination that's happening there. Dallas County is doing care coordination as well. We're working in Hood, EREF, Somerville with their Child Advocacy Center, Johnson County, Rockwell County, Grayson and Fannin County, and so we're expanding as we get out from the cities, the DFW Metroplex, because as Larinda showed you, we're a part of that triangle of demand and where the trafficking is happening in our state. So one of the things I want to make sure that we cover today is that we've implemented this screening tool called SEIT, Commercially Sexually Exploited Youth Identification Tool. It is not a psychosocial assessment. It is an information integration tool where you can start to be looking at 8 key indicator areas, and I'm going to show you in just a second, and really get a better picture, even without a direct interview, of what risk factors are for a child who either is or is at high risk of being sexually exploited. And what West Coast Children's Clinic did was develop this tool as a part of their research to action. so that they were getting a picture of what was happening with youth in California. And they had several hundred organizations that they work with to develop this tool. And what they found in that tool was that 75% of these kids didn't know that they were being exploited and didn't see themselves as exploited. That's the centerpiece. And then that exploitation was going on in their life for 2 or more years. Half of them were 14 or younger when the exploitation started. So we know that there are a lot of kiddos who are being missed because we don't know what to look for. I kind of equate the See It tool to learning how to play Where is Waldo? Because the reality is, unless you know what Waldo's wearing, when you look at that collage, you'll never find him. And so once you know what Waldo looks like and you start looking at all of that collage, everybody's wearing red and white. And it's finding that narrowing of what's a red and white hat and where do we see him in the picture and knowing what to look for. And so that's kind of what I think the See It tool does, is helps us to narrow into what are the things that we're looking for and how can we assess what this child may have already going on in their life and what does that look like. So the key indicators are listed here on the slide, and each of them has a subset of questions. This assessment allows us to do information integration from a variety of sources. So it could be in a direct interview. It could be with a psychosocial assessment that you're doing anyway. It could be that you have access to information or records that this child's been in foster care placement, or you could have other information about a child's home situation. So it's when you start to use a systematic way of looking at what that information is, then you can work towards getting a scoring on what their likelihood is of being exploited. So once you go through the training, which is a 3-hour training, and I'm going to offer you an opportunity to do a specific training for Gladney if you like, or you can get in one of the trainings that we already have. We're doing them virtually live online. And it gives you a continuum of concern. So you may have no concern, which is either you don't have enough information or there's no information about a certain aspect of a child's life. There's a possible concern based on what you know about that child. Or once you get done with the scoring in these 8 key areas, you have a score that indicates that there's some clear concern. And we are using clear concern as the key that unlocks the opportunity to participate in care coordination in local communities. And what we're seeing statewide in our assessments that were done over a 2-year period of time from December 17 to December 19 is we've screened almost 20,000 kids. And we are seeing, in keeping with the data that West Coast Children's Clinic had from their evidence base on the tool, is that about 13% of our kids, and these are high-risk kids that were being screened, in many of them in TJJD or by DFPS in 5 specific counties, that only 13% of them out of all of those that were done were clear concern. But that still leaves us with 13 out of every 100 kids that were screened come back with a clear concern. And then that prompts us to take action on behalf of that kid so that we can see that they get the kind of care that we're responsible for making happen through our programs. So for the See It training, if Gladney would like to have a specialized training just for them, somebody can email me on behalf of the group. We have a 25-person limit for each training, so we may have to do multiple ones, noting how many people are on this call. And then we do have 2 dates that are scheduled for September 9th and September 22nd. The first one's in the afternoon and the second one's in the morning. And as soon as I get those Eventbrites, I'll make sure that your staff get that information as well. But we would love for you to have an opportunity to participate in that training. It also requires that you have a licensure agreement, and that's something that Gladney could certainly work out with them. Some of our specialized response services include the drop-in center, and you'll see here I put on there soon in Fort Worth, the underground. I'm very excited about this because our children have had no options to get what their needs are met without having to exchange them for sexual abuse. And we want to make sure that we're offering them an opportunity to get what they need and to find a way to get safety planning in place and potentially connect with other services like ACH for emergency shelter or other things that are in the local community. We also have in North Texas a emergency shelter and long-term residential over in Garland at Jonathan's Place. So Larinda talked about their CSA advocates. As far as I'm concerned, CSA advocates are kind of like the special sauce, if you will, on what's working well. And I don't know of any other state in the United States that's doing this at the level that we are. And it's really important that we express our just joy at what Unbound's been able to do along with Traffic 911 in the Tarrant County area to make sure that services are being made available 24 hours to meet these children where they are in support of any recoveries by law enforcement or other agencies that need them to respond. We also have those advocates across the state in 111 counties at this point. And we're working diligently to make sure that we leverage what other resources may be in the communities that don't have CSA advocates available, including our rape crisis centers. And we hope to blanket the state with this. It's a very robust model with a high level of professionalism. These are not volunteers. They work in sliding scale case management with others who are working as advocates, and they do a tremendous amount of work in helping children to self-regulate and to get their needs met in a variety of ways. All right, what questions do you guys have? This is my contact information and the team down at the Capitol when we could still get together for pictures.
There's no questions yet. If you guys want to ask questions in the chat, I'll be happy to read those.
I did have them put up a couple different links. I see that somebody found the free training. Yay! Thank you, Jenny. And then I put up the Be the One campaign. If you're not familiar with the documentary that the Office of the Attorney General did, it's multiple vignettes, and it shows everyday ordinary Texans who saw something. It didn't seem right to them. They made the outreach to the law enforcement community or DFPS, and from that, a trafficking case was worked by the Office of the Attorney General. And so they demonstrate not only how that came into the public vantage point, what that person did, but also they are showing what the outcomes were for that victim of trafficking in some of the vignettes, and talking about if you see something, say something, because you never know, you may be the only one who has enough knowledge to recognize what's happening in that child's life to be able to come forward and say, I think something's here and we need some help.
Yes, that's awesome.
Also in the comments, we put the gov.texas.gov/CSTT. That's our team website, and there's a whole lot more information there on each of the 6 areas that I talked about: prevention, recognition, recovery, supportive healing, and bring justice, as well as a compilation of resources that we put up in that space as well.
What would you say, what would be, I know that there's several contact numbers and different agencies from anywhere from, your local all the way to federal level that you can make reports to. If you're out in the community and you're, you're looking and you're kind of just, there's any question that maybe there's something going on, who would be the best person to contact at that point? Would it be local? Would it be federal? Would it be state?
Always start, I think, with the state. So if you call 911 from where you are, it should be routed through the 911 system to the local police department.
Okay.
So that's a good place to start. And if you just have some suspicions and you're really not sure, you can call the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And if you want to, I'll put this 3737888. It's 888-373-7888. I have to remember it differently because it's got so many 8s and 3s and 7s. So it's 888-373-7888. So you can call the National Human Trafficking Hotline if you believe that that person is not in imminent danger. So okay. Call 911 if you think that person's in imminent danger. Call 888 number if you think that you just want to report some suspicion, and it will be routed. We have a grant to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And so they've been working to make sure that they get all of the services that are available up on their directory. They have an internal and external directory, and you can certainly look there. They also do texting. If you text Be Free, that's how you can get them by text message as well. And they will route it to the local law enforcement agency. And if it involves a child, I would highly recommend that you go the local law enforcement route, because you just don't know what the situation is, and it's better for them to investigate it. But like Larinda said, please, please, please do not become vigilante and think you're going to rescue a child. You put yourself at risk, and you put the child at risk. And I really want to encourage you to call 911 if you think it's imminent. The other thing is, if you've got some suspicion on the backside, the child's in a placement, you're not, the child isn't in crisis, you should reach out to DFPS, to the statewide intake, either by phone or online. Yeah. And either one, law enforcement or DFPS, fulfills your mandated reporting requirements.
Got it. Okay. We do have one question. What are some ways for domestic violence or sexual violence programs to increase outreach and improve services for CSA?
Oh, that's a really good question. Thank you for asking that. So we've been working with One Safe Place and Unbound to develop this drop-in center, which is a huge value add for your community. That's one way in supporting the work that both of them are doing to make sure that this is available. And when I talked to Michelle and the leadership there, it was like, well, these kids are through our doors for other things that include domestic violence. So let's make sure we're taking good care of our kids in Tarrant County. The other thing is to make sure that we're opening up other opportunities through our sexual assault and women's centers and those kinds of things. They've been involved in the conversations for Tarrant County in the protocol working group and development for the continuum of care through about 24 years old. We have a variety of placement options for adults, and we are with ACH having options for our kiddos. We probably need some other options at this point as well, but I think for our sexual assault resource centers, one of the things that we're working to do is help, especially the rural resources, know what CSA advocacy is and how they can look at their programs to see if they're able to incorporate new programmatic elements that would be that long-term, more intentional relationship building with especially the child victims, and make sure that they're engaging with the local Children's Advocacy Center. So we're working with the Texas Alliance Against Sexual Assault and making sure that we have a training available for those centers to know what CSA advocacy is and what it might look like for them to move their programs in that direction to get a better outcome for our kiddos who may come through the sexual assault and advocacy at a rape crisis center, and making sure that they're connected with their Children's Advocacy Center to meet those immediate needs as well.
Thank you, Tommy. I know there are a few medical providers on with us today. Is there anything that you would say to them as far as their work, either as a social worker or nurse or doctor, if they come into contact with somebody that may be trafficked or they have a suspicion of?
So there's a couple things I would say to that. We have had the SANE nursing program from the hospitals in Tarrant County at the table for protocol development, and they're very much aware of what is happening with children victims who come through the Children's Advocacy Center or that are rescued by law enforcement, and how to respond to that. You heard Larinda say that they had some referrals from medical staff. I can tell you from the Tarrant County Five Stones Task Force today that there was an international person who was referred by a nurse at the hospital locally in Tarrant County, and a mental health outcry through a local hospital, and that's just been in the last month. So our hospitals are starting to become aware of how they can engage with these cases. There's a group called Reclaim 611 that's in the Metroplex, and they actually have a helpline for medical professionals. If you have something and you're not quite sure, Reclaim611.org is their website, and they're available to take phone calls if you need some specific things. We're also working to educate through HHSC. They have what they call the SOAR program, SOAR, and that's all available online now. So if you inquire of Texas HHSC and look for the SOAR program, it's a medical training, and you can actually get your CEUs through them as well. And then we've been working with our local medical providers at various hospital settings and stuff like that in Dallas. And we were doing webinars on screening tools that are specific to a medical setting. So we had West Coast Children's Clinic who designed the See It tool that I talked about earlier, who came on and talked about a specific tool that they developed that's a little different in its design, but it's specific for a medical setting. So it's an intake version that's just a little bit different, has some of the same elements in the key areas, but we're also doing a webinar series on looking at a variety of tools that are available so that ERs can, and medical facilities of any kind really, can utilize those to have a better screening tool. Also, there's an organization called Heal Trafficking, HEAL, trafficking.org, and they have a whole host of resources that are available. And then, of course, Unbound, which is right in your backyard, has an expert, Susan Bloom, who does medical trainings. I highly recommend you engage with her and through Unbound and get her to do some specific training. The hardest part is getting an administrative policy and procedure in place to what do we do with when we have this come through our ER or through our medical facility at some point. And getting everybody on the same page is probably one of the best things that you can do for your organization, making sure that you have policies and procedures in place about how to handle them.
Perfect.
We're glad to help in any of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Tommy. We are so very thankful for your information and for your expertise and just all the things that are happening at the state level, and then also the wonderful tools that we can get in order to be able to better serve those that are in this position. So thank you guys so much. I don't think there's any other questions. Like I said, whenever the webinar ends, there should be a pop-up. If you're on your phone, that pop-up probably won't happen. So if you're on your computer or a tablet, hopefully that will pop up for the CEU link. If not, an hour or so after we end today, you will get an email with the recording as well as the link to the CEU evaluation. Handouts are in here, so if you wanted the presentation, there's the PDF version of both presentations today in the handouts as well as those links. And then also there are several links that are in the chat that Tommy put up, as well as some information to some phone numbers and things like that. So I think that's it. We're right at 3:01. So without further ado, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Larinda. This was wonderful.